So I wanted to start doing presentation videos associated with Noble Ape, and just talking about some of the ideas that I'm working through currently. I'm currently feeling a little bit snookered. Snookered, I don't know. Snookered's a term where you can't really move in any given direction, and that's the way I'm starting to feel about certain aspects of the Noble Ape simulation, or at least the way it's implemented currently. So I wanted to talk through these things with some numbers to illustrate what is going on. So for the latest Mac version, Apple is deprecating OpenGL support. All the Noble Ape related software used OpenGL. So I moved back to Core Graphics as a means of a stepping stone. I think some of what this text will show just indicates that I should move off Core Graphics and probably move to Metal. But there are other interesting things through this as well. So I just wanted to go through where the time was being used currently. So through Core Graphics, the Noble Ape simulation spends, in this iteration, this is without the new weather and with the brain simulation. That's the cognitive simulation. That's the rotating cube with the kind of three-dimensional, I don't know what one would call it, three-dimensional contour map basically being applied. Anyway, so the current simulation, the main thread takes 67.5% of the time, and the CV display link takes 32% of the time, of which from SimCycle, loop being takes 28% of the time, weather cycle takes 3.7% of the time, and then from that you can break that down with the SimBrain loop, which takes 20.8% of the time, being cycle awake 4% of the time, and then basically the remainder with change. And on the draw side, the draw rect takes 65% of the time, of which creating the CG context draw image and all that related stuff takes 59.3% of the time, and shared draw takes 5.5% of the time. So the actual drawing process, the part that Noble Ape controls, the shared draw, takes 5.5% of the time, whereas constructing the stuff around Core Graphics takes 59.3% of the time. So as it is currently with the old weather, the Core Graphics is taking the lion's share. Like doing stuff through Core Graphics is taking the lion's share. So this has to be worked on. Now you see down here the brain loop is taking 20.8% of the time. Increasingly, I don't think I'll be using that because I need to get this running on other devices, and it just needs to be a bit simpler. So if you take off, let's see how this will work. If you take off the brain simulation, the cognitive simulation, the numbers change quite dramatically. So now the main thread takes a whopping 86.4% of the time, which if you break it down here, this is 76.7, 7.2. So this was previously 59.3 and 5.5. So a little bit more time is being spent on shared draw, but really, basically, this is sucking up the percentages of just removing the brain. Down here, we're 13.1, where previously this was 32% of the time, because obviously we've lost a 20% here. Loop being 9.3, weather 3.5, 3.4. Being awake 5% of the time, being listen 1.3, and then the remainder like this. And what was that previously? So it was being cycle awake, previously was 4% of the time. Then there was a brain dialogue, which was, and then basically they were all 0.7. So being listen has been promoted. That was originally only 0.5. It's now 1.3. But, so it's slight reshuffle there. But basically the Core Graphics is taking the majority. Now with the new weather, which has got like alpha blending and a bunch of other stuff and wind and these kind of things, this actually takes more of the processor. So more of the processors, as the case may be. So in this case, here you can see the main thread is reduced back really actually very close to the original numbers. The original number was 67.5, so now it's 65.6, of which the draw rect, again, 64.1% of the time, 58.9% of the time through the core graphics, and the shared draw is only 5.6, so very similar actually to the other numbers, except when you remove the brain simulation, in which case it was 76.7 and 7.2 respectively. Now this is where it gets interesting. So the wind generation, so this is the sim cycle, the wind generation here actually takes 23.5%. Similar mathematics, two-dimensional rather than three-dimensional, but similar mathematics to cognitive simulation, and basically taking what the cognitive simulation used to take, and then looping, and the weather cycle. The weather cycle actually remains roughly the same, basically. So really it's generating the wind and the wind calculation that takes a majority of the time here. And if we go across here, being cycle awake, 3.8, and then basically the 0.7s and change. Being cycle awake in the previous one, without the weather simulation, was 4.0. So, as you can see here, I wanted to introduce things like the new weather. I need to do some optimization there, probably. I've done a lot of optimization already. There's an underlying issue associated with initialization over the top of other initialization, so there's a bug there that needs to be fixed. But basically, I need to get off core graphics. And core graphics is taking a majority of the processing time and not really delivering very much. So if I can rewrite that for Metal, get rid of that and rewrite it for Metal, and hopefully with Metal it'll be much, much lower. There's a lot of additional contingency. You're basically rendering an image. You're creating and rendering an image here, rather than just taking a buffer as provided, a 4-byte buffer of graphics. Instead, you've got to render it an image and then draw that image, which is this astonishing waste of processor power. So yeah, increasingly I want to do things like adding weather, or more realistic weather, and more interesting stuff through here, and revitalizing aspects in here, removing the original cognitive simulation and rewriting something considerably more communicative. But basically I'm being blocked by the core graphics currently. And that's frustrating me. So people ask what's going on with NoBlope currently. These are the kind of problems that I'm facing. I'm just trying to work through getting off core graphics, getting back into a situation where I could start adding more stuff to the simulation without being hugely constrained. Now, I'd like to release it as a store app, you know, a Mac store app. But the processor usage and the energy usage currently is just really overwhelming. And it just strikes me as really strange, because real-time graphics is something that should be relatively easy, and it's not like my actual, you know, this is my contribution to that. 5.6%. Most of it is in core graphics.